Hello, and welcome to the third day of the World Food Forum. My name is Jenna Tesdal, and I'm the director of the youth network, Young Professionals for Agricultural Development. And we're here to talk today about meaningful youth engagement. Why is this so important to me? Well, we're a youth network of over 30,000 young people who really look to build their capacities and also to engage in policy and advocacy. And so that's what we are looking to talk to you about today. Because we know that generational renewal is a huge challenge in food and agriculture. It's something that we are struggling with. And we often hear, well, we have to make agriculture sexy again, right? But we actually also know from EFAD and FAO, and also from our own experiences, that one of the major challenges for young people coming into the food and agricultural sector is that we feel that we don't have a voice, and that we feel that we have a lot of difficulties shaping our food and agricultural systems. And of course, we want to have a say in this. We want to have this change that we want to see to address a myriad of challenges that we're facing that I don't have to name for this audience, right? And so today we want to share with the youth audience, but not only the youth audience, with the intergenerational audience, barriers that young people face, to encourage you in your journey to know that these barriers happen, they're normal, and for our intergenerational allies, how they could perhaps alleviate these barriers, and on the flip side, turn these into key enablers. And so without further ado, I would like to invite our four panelists to the floor, who are going to share unique experiences from their lives about these barriers, about these enablers, from all different backgrounds, because we all have different experiences. We are not a monolith, and I think our panel represents that quite well. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first panelist to the floor, Makalani Gome, the co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Thank you for taking a seat. And Angelica Jacome, she is the director of the Office of Small Island Developing States, SIDS, Least Developed Countries, LDCs, and Landlocked Developing Countries, LLDCs, at FAO. Next, we have Lynn Asri, and she is the co-founder of the Middle East and North Africa, MENA Youth Network. Welcome to the stage. And we have Nicoleta Merlot. She is member of the NAT section of the coordination group of the Year of Youth at the Economic and Social Committee. Welcome to the stage, Nicoleta. First up in our discussion, I would like to ask an icebreaker question to our panelists. And this is really about your journey and your story. And I ask you to please describe your first experience in policy and the road that you took to get there. Makalani, I would invite you to take the floor first.
Aloha mai kākou, o Makanalani Gomes Keia, he kanaka maoli, mai ka aina o Hawaii nei, ma ka mokupuni o Ahu, lawa o ka moku o Keawe. Aloha, my name is Makanalani Gomes. I'm native Hawaiian and a native Hawaiian Filipino woman from Hawaii. I was born and raised on the islands of Oahu, as well as Hawaii Island. Is my picture accompanying me? Well, when it does. This picture was taken on the front lines of an action and protection for Mauna Kea, our sacred mountain. It'll be referred as Mauna Kea or Mauna Wa Kea, the mountain where Sky Father, Wa Kea, and Earth Mother, Papa Hanau Moku, that which births islands, meet. And there are many sacred sites. There are many places where our rituals need to be fulfilled. And it's the tallest mountains from the Earth's core all the way up into the atmospheres. And so we were standing to protect her and the ancestral elements that nourish her, like the mist, Lilinoi, like Poliahu, who is responsible for the snow, like Mo'oinanea, who is the woman caretaker of the water. And I will invite you to all think that all of these are women, which also makes me want to bring in that I am one of 3 co-chairs of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. And I think for the first time in the caucus's history, all 3 of us are women. And that 2 of us are here, and one of our sisters, I want to bring her in here, and she cannot be with us because she is facing severe political crises, and for her safety, she can't be here. And so I will also talk about that, about the importance of our safety as women. So as true to Indigenous storytelling, this was taken in 2019, but really my political, or my experience with policy started when I was, I think from my infancy, I have an elder that says, every Hawaiian or every Indigenous child born is an act of revolution. Because folks have to understand that, we're here despite erasure. There are purposeful and meaningful things done that, despite our resistance, that we should actually not even be here. I'm a descendant of 40,000. Before colonization, my people were in the millions, before the introductions of, the white man's diseases. And so and when I was 23, I was introduced and started my job at the state legislature and was able to work for a Native Hawaiian House representative, and she was able to mentor me. But it wasn't until I was 23 did I really have access to a mentor who was in the political sphere. And I think that's really important. My mom went back to work when I was maybe 3 months old or 6 months old. And she is my hero, and I've had her in my life my entire time. And I was raised with my great-grandparents, my great-grandmothers, and my grandparents, who I revere as my first teachers. But it's really important that, these systems of oppression and these systemic issues, we don't get to sit with our elders because we're working and we're taking care of our community and tending to our sick and tending to our lands. We're disenfranchised from what should have been our birthrights, the right to gather in women's circles, the right to sit together. And so throughout my life, I've been able to work within the state sector and now here on a global level with my brothers and sisters in the caucus. And really, we continue to stand for our rights and to stand for the reinforcement of the Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights, because we have no choice, because we are her first children. And so really, our whole lives are political. And so although this picture was taken in 2019, this is really the manifestation of me fulfilling my responsibility and my birthright in what my ancestors have named me. And my name is Makanalani, or the gift from the atmospheres, the gift from the celestial beings. And so I know that it's my gift to bring out the gifts of other people and to also use my gifts. And so this is my gift, as well as my sisters. Those are all feminine identifying folks who were on the front lines after our elders were arrested. So really, our whole lives from inception are political. Mahalo.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm really moved by the experiences that you're sharing, and this aspect of our very beings being an act of rebellion, an act of revolution. This is the barrier, but also the enabler, right, that you're talking about. Thank you so much. Next up, I would like to invite Angelica to share her experiences for an intergenerational exchange with our group.
Well, thank you very much, Jenna. And Makalani, you're a tough act to follow, let me tell you that. So I don't know if my picture will come on line.
It should momentarily,
Okay,
yes.
great. So when you see my picture, you're going to think that's me. It's actually not me. It's my niece, because when I started my, let's say, policy experience, or when I started my first job, more or less was the time when my eldest niece was born, Paola. Paola is now, as you can see, a medical student. She's in her first year of studying medicine. She actually lives in Puerto Rico, which is also an island nation. She is a source of inspiration, and this is about youth. And I wanted to share a bit, before sharing my experience, I wanted to draw her into this conversation, because it is an intergenerational experience. It's not only about, it's not that only youth learn from those that are older, but we also learn a lot from youth, those of us that are older. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share my story and to have this discussion with such an exciting panel. So my first job experience was in the Panamanian mission to the United Nations. I'm from Panama. The political landscape at the time, it was more or less a little bit after the Balkan wars, and I was in college when it pretty much started, and also the Rwandan genocide. So there were very impactful things that drew me into international relations, and this is what I studied at the university, and I went on to work in the mission of Panama. In Panama, we had elected our first female president and our only female president to date. And that is one factor of really opening up the participation of women in the Panamanian society. Now we have, for example, had a few ministers of foreign relations, which was usually always a job that was ascribed to men, only. So things are definitely opening up. It's still a barrier. I think women's participation fully in Panama is still a barrier, but we've made a lot of strides, and I think it's a common thing in most places, is that everybody's making progress, and progress unfortunately is slow, but I think hopefully we'll get there someday. At least I hope in my lifetime we'll get there, but let's see. And at the mission, of course, what's one of the main hurdles I'm sure all of you have experienced when you go into your first jobs? They say, what experience do you have? You don't have any experience. Why can't, you can't opine on this because you don't have experience. Well, how do we get experience? And that's always the first question. So you do have a bit of source of guidance from some people, and I think that's very important. And I think that's the role sometimes of those of us who are older. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of people guiding my path. And some of them weren't always people that were working in my favor. So I'll throw the people that were actually helping me and were actually concerned and actually wanted me to succeed. There were two types. There was the one type that was more, let's say, the parental figure and sharing, this is what you should do. Perhaps you should go in and have, get a master's, get another degree. These types of things, which are very encouraging and they're very soft. There were others who actually were, they were with good faith, but they were very critical. You're not doing this correctly, you're not doing that correctly. And the first thing we think when people do that, we think, oh, but they're not appreciating my work. They're not, they don't think what I'm doing is good. They don't see my efforts. And many times they're actually not. They're actually people who are actually concerned about you and they want you to do better. Because it's one of those things when you're, when you're a kid, when your mother tells you not to touch a hot pan and you don't listen and you touch it and you burn yourself and then you're like, oh, okay, I never do it again. And so people are trying to guide you to avoid those mistakes. And we're young, when one is young, one is very risky. And you don't necessarily take those risks when you're older. So don't always take this, older people commenting, trying to maybe critique your work or telling you to go here as something that's done in bad faith. Many times they're actually concerned they don't want you to get burnt.
So they want you to learn from their mistakes. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. We do also learn from our mistakes, making them on our own. And then there's the people who actually acted in bad faith, and they actually tried to undermine what you were doing, or do something really wrong. I'll just put it that way. But sometimes those people ended up helping you. You find yourself in a situation years later where you say, at the end of the day, yes, at the time I felt, this person really, really harms me, but I'm in a better place now. And I don't know where they are. Frankly, it's their problem, but I'm in a better place. I've moved on. So I think that's also important. Sometimes we just need to move on and reflect upon what we're doing. Another thing that happens to us when we're young is sometimes we either over or underestimate our capacities. And this is something it's very important. You have to have a lot of self-awareness. We all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. It's important to find ways to highlight your strengths and bring them out. And there's also an importance to know your weaknesses and know where you need to improve. None of us are perfect. There's going to be areas where we're always going to excel at, where we're always more natural, and there are going to be areas where we don't. And I want to touch a little bit upon the guidance and mentorship, because here at FAO, the FAO Youth and Women's Committees have developed a mentorship program. It's a formal program, so this is very exciting, but it's a formal program for FAO staff. But sometimes mentorship is organic. At least in my experience, I never went to this formal program. I never had it in one of my my previous positions. But there was an organic mentorship with people, again, who were very concerned, or not concerned, that's probably not the word. They were very hopeful, and they wanted to guide me in order to succeed. So I think this is important, that you find people you connect with. If you don't have a formal mentorship program, you find some people you connect with, and you try to seek out their advice, and usually they'll be working in your favor. So I think I'm going to stop here, and because I think you may perhaps let the others speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your reflections. I really picked up a thread of this feminist connection that also Makalani was talking about, not only from your niece, but also to the president that you were talking about, who was a role model in your life. And also then looking at that role of networks and mentorship in your experience, and these good faith actors and bad faith actors that make us stronger. Thank you so much for your reflections. Next, I would like to invite Lean to share her story.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Lean, and I'm a young activist. It took me some time to actually start calling myself an activist. I always felt like it was somehow wrong, or maybe I didn't deserve it, or whatever. That's another story. But but my journey is actually interesting, because I started out caring. It all started with me really being fascinated by nature and caring about it. As simple as that. It wasn't really me being aware of all the issues that were, affecting how it's being used and everything. So it actually just started with like me wanting to buy National Geographic books and watching National Geographic documentaries and being so fascinated and so impressed. But something I was noticing with these documentaries and books that I was buying is that they always end with this note that, see this beauty, it's all not gonna last if we continue the way we are, and it's all, set to be destroyed, and look what's happening right now. So this is where my awareness kind of started of there's something wrong and I need to do something about it, and I was only like 10 at the time. And so the first thing I started to do was kind of tell my friends in school about it, like, do you know that there's something wrong, everything is like dying out, we need to do something about it. But there wasn't really much space within like where I was living, there wasn't really much space to kind of make these, collective action as young people. It wasn't very safe and it wasn't very welcome. But generally, I realized that through media and through stories of other people who are on the front lines and everything, I started to find this issue very important to me. And so now I study media and communications at university because this is how I got into the field, by reading other people's stories, by storytelling, by film, by books, by pictures, and all that. And so my journey with activism, it started very small, it started very local. It started with me telling my friends, and then in university we started a club where we would just get people to share their experiences. We're working in the sustainability field, some people, very different people, some people working like grassroots level, some people working in policy. So we really wanted to find these connections and let people share their stories. And so we started organizing somehow awareness sessions, and then we started organizing sit-ins and little protests and stuff. But generally, like where I come from, there are so many issues that people feel they need to prioritize. They don't have time to care about the environment, in a sense. They don't have time to care about these things because they feel like, oh, you're coming here to tell me I need to save nature, well, I don't have enough money to eat, for example. So there's this disconnection. There isn't much. So what we try to do in terms of how we communicate is we try to show that these political, economic, and social issues that are so heavily affecting your life are also environmental issues, or the environmental issue is also a social justice issue and is also a political issue and an economic issue as well. And so this way you go like, when we are trying to solve the environmental crisis, or when we're trying to raise awareness about climate change, we really need to get this perspective forward that going, for example, green is actually going to help you get out of this, because this is an effect, because climate change is an effect of these systems that made you impoverished, in a sense. So this is the connection that we really try to build where I come from, because if you come to them with a sense of, they think it's a first world issue, like, oh, even though they're the ones affected, and we see it every day. And so there's this picture, it was taken a year ago almost, and this is in Lebanon. And this is actually the first time I decided to write the poster in Arabic. And I don't know why I didn't think about this before. Like, our audiences, they speak Arabic. And we're not here, it's not like a bourgeoisie movement, the climate movement. So it's always like, we want solar panels or something on posters, but they're all in English. So people are walking around, they're just gonna be like, what is this? Only the people who are like, who have knowledge of English are going to understand. So this is when I was like, actually, this is another thing with communicating. Let's use the language of the people that we're trying to communicate to. And so what's written here is "Bidna ta'a shamsiyya," which means we want solar energy. Because I'm sure maybe many of you are aware that in Lebanon we do not have electricity. Like, now we have 0 hours of electricity coming from the government in some places. And so people rely on private generators and very high fees to kind of get their electricity, and not for the whole day. And so it's really interesting how some communities actually started to invest in solar panels by themselves, just as a solution to get electricity. It's not really with this intention that, oh, this is actually better for the environment. It's just because they had to. It's a necessity now. And so this was what we were trying to encourage in that, sit-in that we organized. And this was my work before policy. But then in these spaces and in my university, I started getting links to these conferences, apply for this conference and for that. And I had no experience in policymaking. All I was doing was sharing stories, getting people aware, raising awareness on the local grassroots level, and so on and so forth. But then I was like, I applied, to see what would happen. And then to my surprise, I got accepted. This was the Youth Pre-COP. It's the Youth for Climate event that took place in Milan last year. And so when I got accepted and I got into policy, I actually didn't know anything about how the space operated. Just got in there, and this is when I started learning about policy. It wasn't like I had experience with it before at all. I knew it was like politics was so important because I understood that on the individual level, there's only little we can do because it's a systematic issue. So I always knew that it was important, but I didn't know how to get through. And so this was something that always made me doubt myself. Do I even deserve to be in these spaces? Many of the acronyms, I don't even know what they mean, like MAP, blah, 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 what's that? So it was like confusing for me, but I was learning along the way. And when I got into these spaces, this was when it was very different. I saw a very new, mobilization for climate action, and I really, really appreciated what other people were doing. I learned a lot, and this is actually how we founded the MENA Youth Network. Also, shout out to the other co-founder here, Jim. So this is how we founded it. We met in these spaces outside our region in Italy. And this is the only time where I actually met other activists that are working in this space. And we're very rare. We see each other in every conference. So there's not much of us. And so we decided to make something that would last and get more people into policy, because we thought that this is actually really needed. Our voices need to be reflected in policy because we have very different perspectives. So I guess I'll leave it here, and then we can talk more about hurdles and key enablers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lean, for sharing your story. I think this thread also of feeling perhaps like we don't deserve or we don't know enough, right, to engage in these spaces is something that you're overcoming, or a lot of us have overcome in this space. And then that role of the network that you formed and those connections with other young people, intergenerational, has really made a difference in your journey. Next, I would like to invite Nicoleta to share with us her journey to policy.
Yes. Hello, everybody. First of all, let me thank FAO and the World Food Forum for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and to represent here the European Economic and Social Committee. When I think about the start of my experience, I have to say that I was born and grew up in Campo Ligure, a very small village located in the northwest of Italy. And I decided when I was very young to start to do something that could be useful for others and for the citizen. And so I enjoyed more association for some years. And then when I was 22, I decided to run for a position in my municipality, and I became the youngest assessor ever. It was an amazing experience. I did 2 mandates, and so 10 years, in which I worked in a lot of topics, from tourism to youth policy and from social policies to education. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people, and it was really an amazing experience, probably the best experience I've ever had. And in this picture, you saw me representing the mayor and so all the citizens during a demonstration organized by the local committee of the Italian Red Cross. And I have to say that it happens sometimes to wear the Italian flag representing the mayor, but it has been always a great emotion for me to wear this flag, because I felt on my shoulder the responsibility to represent my municipality and the citizen of Campo Ligure. After these 10 years, I met the trade union, especially CISL, which is one of the biggest trade unions in Italy, and I decided to work with them because I saw and I understood that trade union can help a lot, not only workers, but also, for example, unemployed or young people. And so I decided to engage myself in this trip, first at local and regional level, and after I came to Rome and I became the head of youth policy at the national level for my confederation. And in 2017, I started also an experience at European level at the ETUC. ETUC is the European Trade Union Confederation, the biggest organization who represents more than 45 million workers all over Europe. And it has a youth committee, and I was part of this committee for a lot of years. And for one mandate, I also have been part of the bureau representing not only the trade unions of Italy, but also the trade unions of Spain and Portugal. And last but not least, 2 years ago, I was appointed to be part of the European Economic and Social Committee, and I became the youngest member of the Italian delegation and one of the youngest member of the entire committee. In the committee, I'm part of the section who deals with agriculture, rural development, and environment. And I'm also part, as you said during the presentation, of the coordination group for the European Year of Youth. And it's a great honor for me to be part of this committee who represents all the civil society.
Thank you so much. I think really there were some themes of a rural to urban journey that you're touching on there, that your policy journey has taken you through. And also this structural inclusion of youth that you also hit on, Lean, this youth mechanism through Jungo that you were able to engage in, but then also through the trade union, that then there was also an opportunity for youth explicitly to engage. So this actually branches to the follow-up question, right? And I'm actually, for sake of time, going to marry the next two questions together and ask you to describe a key moment which describes a significant hurdle that you want to hit on, but then also the flip side. How were you able to maybe take that hurdle and either overcome it, bypass it, go around it, grow from it? So, Makulani, would you like to start?
Sure. I think I would go back to Mauna Kea because I think it represents for many of us, many of our Indigenous family, the issues that we're facing and is a key barrier. You know, being on the front line, I think, is also a symbol and a metaphor for what we're facing. It's not really that we have a choice. You know, this is the manifestation of our birthright, as I said before, our birthright and our birth responsibility. And in so many of our stories, we've had maybe a couple of days in person, and we work a lot online. But there's a common theme that we're all the first children of Earth Mother, and maybe grandmother or grandmother Earth, and Sky Father, grandfather Sky. But this really tells us, all of our stories and all of the teachings of our elders really show us that we have to be there. Because truly these are our family members, because we can show it, and we're so fortunate, I think, to have that, but it's one and the same. It's a barrier, and yet it uplifts us because we know. We can say, this is why I have to be there, and we have to defend it. And I think if folks are not familiar with the movement on Mauna Kea, it's to ensure that no further telescopes will be built on our sacred mountain. And it's the 30-meter telescope, so TMT. Now, the thing with TMT, and I think with many issues that we face, is that many of our mountains are natural aquifers. So this is not just because if people can't relate to the spiritual aspect or the genealogical aspect or our cosmogony stories, then understand that this will affect us all, especially for island nations. We only have, the way our islands were birthed, are water tables. And so when you crack those water tables, it takes generational time in which definitely none of us will be here. These are generations and generations for the earth to repair itself. And so one of our islands, and we know that what happens because in the 1970s, the United States Navy bombed our island of Kaho'olawe and cracked its water table. Now we go to the island and we try to call for rain, and we chant for rain, and we try to bring it over. But the thing is, we even have to navigate, just like we navigate these spaces and places, the bombs that were left, because the entire island isn't clean. So even if they surrender and they give back our land, they don't clean it up. They don't do the right thing. They don't give it back to us how they found it. And so many of us right now, and especially being from the Pacific or Oceania, we get left out of the conversation, but we're the caretakers and the descendants of Moana Nui Akea, the great ocean. We manage and we care for the ocean. And as we see sea levels rising, many of our stories tell us how to navigate those times and how to understand and adapt. Because she's adapting, Earth Mother is adapting to all of the harmful things that we're doing to her. And so we need to listen to her to ensure that we can survive. And so, although I think there's a barrier in the fact that navigating these spaces are so difficult, and governments and agencies don't want to meet us where we're at. They won't come. Something that we've talked about is come to our places. If you're invited, come to our places, come correct. And we have to engage spiritually. I hate to say this, but I've seen so many people come and they want to witness our spiritual ceremonies, and then they leave halfway through. That's not okay. That's not right. Because we know that the reason we got here, the reason we're in this predicament is because we're thinking too much with the greed, with the ego, and we haven't listened to the spirit. And our teachings and our invitations to engage are to bring out the spirit within all of us, not just indigenous peoples, but we can help you access that part of yourself as well, because the global family has that in common. And so I think, right, it brings out our culture. Mauna Kea brought us together as a Hawaiian community, as an oceanic community, our brothers and sisters from Aotearoa, New Zealand, from Australia, from Tuvalu, from Tonga, from Samoa, and then our brothers and sisters from Turtle Island came. Everyone came together because we know that we face the same issues, the Dakota Access Pipeline, Ihu Mato. We have no choice but to go to the front line. And it brings out the best of us because it's medicine. We get to gather, we get to be with our people and our elders because we don't live in community like we used to. We work jobs, we work 9-to-5 jobs. We come home, we take care of our family, and we only get together on certain holidays. But at the same time, while we're defending our lands, and it hurts us to have to put our bodies forward in order to defend our sacred lands, we are defending it for everyone. It's not because we're selfish and we don't want you to have access. It's because we want everyone to have access for the rest of our lives and for the generations to come. So while I think having to protest or having to access activism in this way is such a barrier because we don't necessarily are not welcome, and we don't have the safety and the trust ensured to us while engaging in negotiation with member states or on the government levels. We can figure out our own area, and protest is a chance for us to negotiate. But I hate that it takes us having to literally sacrifice our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual self to be on those front lines. But I think in every generation, and all of my friends and said, TMT will never get built. I manifest that TMT will never get built because no matter what, we will always go there. We will always defend our sacred lands. And forever, but we will forever be protesters and protectors of our lands. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. I think that's also a call to action for us, right? To say we need to be able to guarantee people's safety. This has been a theme throughout the panel as well, and it's absolutely unacceptable that we cannot guarantee our safety in our daily activities and in our political activism, and that is not even a choice in your activism, right? But this message that your spirituality and the community and this coming together is this powerful force that keeps you going and your community going. That's fantastic, and you shouldn't have to overcome a barrier like that. Lean, I would invite you to take the floor and tell us about some of the key barriers you face and also some of the key enablers.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, very inspiring.
Yes.
Anyway, so taking after that is like, so in terms of like when we get to these spaces, especially from our parts of the world, and these spaces are usually hosted by countries in the global north, there are a lot of hurdles that are geopolitical as well. Like simplest level is the visa, trying to get the visa, trying to apply for the visa, sitting and stressing and waiting, and then them asking you for the craziest things, like list everywhere you've ever lived for the past 15 years. Like, how am I even supposed to remember that? And why do you want my Instagram anyway? So you have to list all of that stuff. You have to wait. You have to see. So there are many, for example, conferences where you get the access, where you get the funding, but then there's the problem with your visa being denied or delayed. And it did let us miss out a lot. And it still to this day does make, for example, we had our event in the MENA Youth Network, and we invited the Yemeni delegation to come here, and even the Yemeni delegation's visa at first got denied. And so if they are the delegation, the official delegation, and their visas got denied, so that's a big issue of access as well. So in terms of like another hurdle, it's basically like sometimes when you get into these spaces and you keep working in policy and with politicians and all that, sometimes it gets tiring, because sometimes you do feel like a lot of greenwashing drains you, for example, or a lot of youth tokenism drains you. And then you start thinking, why am I even doing this now? I'm so tired, I'm so burnt out and drained. And as you said, like, we're putting our spiritual health, our mental health, all of it, because we do believe in how urgent this is. But sometimes when you do not see the reciprocation of that urgency, you feel angry, frustrated, and tired. So that's another hurdle. But in terms of like how we managed to fight that, or how I managed to do that, it's basically by seeing you guys. So seeing the young people here, seeing how they persevere despite all of that, seeing how they, collect together and go like, you know what, let's start something on the local level. Like, for example, if I learn something from here, I will go and try to apply that on a small scale back where I'm from. Try to, I learned a new concept, try to convey it there and see how it fits there. So just seeing how we work and how we are relentlessly hopeful despite everything, this is what really keeps me inspired. And so even like another enabler, or how we managed to work around this, is after the event, the first event, policy event that I attended last year, which was the Youth COP in Milan. When I met other activists from the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, I didn't want to let them go. I was like, you guys are so rare, and I've never actually met you. And it's crazy how we had to meet in another, like in Milan, rather than in Egypt, for example, or in Lebanon or anywhere else. And so we didn't want to let each other go. And so we immediately got this idea for the MENA Youth Network, which is what we founded, so that we can always stay in touch. And when we get to these spaces, try to get to as much people from our region as we can. And so it's a journey, of course. Sometimes it's really tiring, sometimes it's really rewarding, but because we believe in its urgency and importance, and because we are relentlessly hopeful, as I said, we won't stop. Like, we won't give up, And as like cliche as it sounds, like if not us, then who? Seriously, and if we don't take this action now, there's no other time. It's very, very urgent, and we have to do it because it's our future. This is our future.
I love that line, relentlessly hopeful. I think you are taking so much strength also from each other, right? Through this really frustrating process that we have described here, but then taking that strength from our networks, right? This is really, I think, a red thread through the presentations here. Angelica, I would invite you to share some of those key barriers, and on the flip side, key enablers.
If you allow me to kind of switch up the question, because I want to pick up something that Leah said, and to a certain extent it was in very President Makolani's. We all speak English here, so the fact that we're here means we're in a position of privilege. I was listening to Leah speak about her visa issues. I don't recall ever having, I mean, yes, I filled out visa applications and some of the questions might have been, difficult, but I don't recall ever having real issues, worries that, my visa was not going to be granted and that I would miss some important conference. And here, we're engaging youth, and here I'll particularly talk about SIDS, LDCs, and LLDCs. And they also mentioned the issue of language. This is a key barrier that they have to engage properly. They don't necessarily speak the 6 UN languages. If they may not. But even if they do, it's not that it's very commonplace. This is going on in English. People are listening to us in English, and it's there is reasons for that being, but at the same time, we exclude a great part of the world doing that. And in LDCs, they also have in SIDS and LDCs, the lack of opportunities. I mean, here, I look at all of you and I'm so impressed, and I think I have a very new role models today, and I'll go into a little bit of role models in a bit because I want to discuss something about that. But this is a great opportunity. I mean, this is a great opportunity to share your experiences. Wouldn't it be wonderful if also all these youth from SIDS, LDCs, and LLDCs had these opportunities? And not to mention there are other barriers, food security, nutrition, climate change was mentioned, all these things that, they're real and they're present in their lives. And that it limits them from being able to engage and share their voice with everybody. So I think as a collective group, and here I am tasking this exciting group of young women to help us get there and get the word out and then get everybody engaged. I know there are some SIDS, LDCs, and LLDCs participants in the World Food Forum, and many of them had didn't know if they had a flight until maybe Thursday, Friday, some even Saturday, and some of them unfortunately couldn't make it. So this is something that it's a real barrier to participating. And I wanted to go back because I didn't really mention the issue of role models because I think this is important. And indeed, I think most of my role models are feminine. I'll hit my niece is one of them. She's a brilliant, well-spoken. I'm looking at all you around this audience. I'm so impressed, and I'm a bit jealous because I wish I could express myself the way you do and be as inspiring as you are. But I'm here trying my best. Also, my grandmother, who didn't have the experience to have a very close relationship because she died when I was very young. But we have a spiritual connection. So all the spiritual, when you were mentioning about the spiritual connection to the earth and to the ancestors and how that really comes through. And obviously my mother always pushed me and encouraged me. And I really, really wanted to mention that all of you are new role models for me. And I hope I can learn along with you. And you can guide my way for the rest of my career. And I can help you to also share your voice and amplify your voice. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angelica, for telling us about this connection between generations, right? And also this role of feminism also in your journey, right? That sometimes we don't hit upon the importance of this, right? I mean, now we have an all-woman panel. This is not very common, right? And so I definitely think it's salient to hit upon that point. Nicoleta, would you like to share?
Yes. Regarding the barriers, initially at political level, the most difficult thing for me was to prove to the people I met every day that I was up to the role that I had. This was because I was 22 years old, and in Italy it is still hard to accept that 22 young women can have the skills and the leadership to play these roles, no matter how good you are or how committed you are. But I have to say that being in that situation made me grow a lot and made me more aware of myself and of my value. And growing up, the problem became being a woman, because there are still few women in leadership positions, even fewer young women, and there are still many cliches and stereotypes to break down from this point of view.
Yeah.
And it's like a young woman never has to stop proving to the other people that she deserved the position that she has acquired. And so often she finds herself working harder to feel herself equal to men. And this also then struggles with another problem, that is the work-life balance, because sometimes it's difficult to find a compromise between your personal life, your private life, and your working life, especially if, as is it in my case, you live in Campo Ligure, you work in Rome, and then you move to Brussels right every week for the ESC. So this is challenging, but I have to admit that at European level the situation is better, is improving, and in the ESC I found a lot of colleagues who are very committed to the issue of youth and women's empowerment, and this is very important. About the key enablers that led me where I am, I'm strongly convinced that being in the right place at the right time is crucial. Lucky often plays an important role, but of course it's not enough on its own. You need passion, you need perseverance, motivation, a lot of commitment, and a lot of study and a lot of work. But the most important thing is that we never have to lose focus on the goal, the reason why we are where we are, and we do what we do, and we must do everything to achieve it. Day by day and step by step. Of course, we as young people also, in my opinion, need to be followed by more experienced people who can guide us and who can give us a lot of examples and share with us best practices. And for this reason, I strongly think that the meaningful discussion and intergenerational cooperation is a key to achieve some important result. And I've been lucky, I can say that I've been lucky because during my different experience at different level, I always found people who supported me, who encouraged me, and who have been inspiring for me. So I'm a lucky girl.
Thank you so much. I think what you're hitting on, the societal perception, is such a challenge, I think, for all of us that we've described, right? But then on the other hand, this allyship, this lifting each other up through our networks, or what I've seen happening already on this panel is a lot of support for the other panelists, right? And a lot of validation for your messages. And I think that's something that I'll take with me, and I hope that I live every day in my work, but also in my personal life. However, I balance that with the unpaid work, the care work that we do, the traveling between rural and urban areas, or requesting visas, all of these things. And also seeing that sometimes finance or a little bit of money made a big difference in lives as well is a theme that I think we didn't quite touch on directly, but definitely is something that can help with the visa application or access education or access interpretation services. And so we're going to wrap it up here with our panel. And I just want to thank you deeply for sharing your experiences, for interacting with the other panelists, and for agreeing to be on this very shiny stage here today. And now, going into the rest of the day, we will have the opportunity to engage through the youth action track or the school assemblies, if you want to learn more about how to express your political voice, to connect with other young people. And we're also going to have another presentation up on this stage from Jim Pruitt, and he is the president and CEO of the Hunger Project. He will be providing an organizational case study on how different institutions can elevate the voices of youth in the fight against hunger. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenna. First of all, what inspiring words. This is a very tough act to follow. Thank you very much, and wonderful, wonderful presentation. I just want to make a few quick points. I know we're short on time. First of all, for us at the Hunger Project, we are working very intensely to bring about transformation of global food systems, and especially tapping the power of youth. And there's a number of reasons for this, but the fundamental question that we ask is how might we support youth, remove the barriers, as one of the earlier panelists said, remove the barriers so that youth can take more entrepreneurship and leadership roles. Why? Now there's, of course, tremendous public policy efforts here. Youth are more than 50% of the population in India, more than 60% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a tremendous power here that youth have. Another reason, and I think Angelica on this panel mentioned it, is that youth behave differently in the food system. And that is to say that tolerance for risk is so much higher. And we desperately need experimentation and innovation and new thinking on food. And there's a very obvious, from Rome and New York, where I live, and other urban areas, there's a very obvious impact on the food system of youth. When you look at the farm-to-table movement, when you look at new types of restaurants and foods that are coming out, there's a huge push from youth. But at the same time, we know that's one aspect of the food system, but the global food system is not going to change without more depth. And for the markets in the US and Europe, these are consolidated markets. There's a lot more barriers for youth to get involved at that deeper level. And what we see in other countries is just more opportunity for youth to get engaged. The primary example I want to share is in Bangladesh. We have a network called Youth Ending Hunger. And it started about 15 years ago. It's now 100,000 young people that are working toward improvements in their own communities. And this has to do with nutrition in the first 1,000 days, getting information out there, but also everything from marriage, youth marriage, and also preventing youth marriage, and also water and sanitation. And they've made tremendous strides. This network of 100,000, it started with just a few clubs and rapidly expanded. And I think we need to connect it with the UN Youth Club here. I'll close here, but just to say that when we look forward, we look at youth in agriculture, youth in our global food systems. Every farm that exists out there that's held by a farmer, they say there's 40 seasons in the farmer's lifetime. And the way those farmers behave in the first 10 seasons, first 10 agricultural seasons versus the next 10 and the next 10, the last 10, the potential for change is so much greater in the first 10 seasons of the farmer's existence. So if we want to grow food in harmony with the earth, if we want to grow nutritious, healthy food, we desperately need to work with young people around the world. Thank you very much.
forget.